Here's what I remember more than anything else. You're in the service, you're in the Army for 15 months. You get an opportunity to get out to play, and the next thing you know, you're at the All-Star break. Here I am. I'm walking to the locker room. My coach is Red Holzman. My locker is next to Walt Frazier. Dave DeBuscher is across from me. Thank God my college roommate and teammate, Wes Unseld, is there. Are you getting the picture here?
Absolutely.
I'm looking and I'm saying, damn, should I ask for their autograph or what?
Then you are in Australia right now.
You're talking NBA basketball. You're talking great teams. You're talking great individual players.
Takes it off, and there's number 23, and of course Johnny goes nuts.
So I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it now.
I just tried to go out there and play my game.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Adam. I don't like anybody. I'm not a people person.
Strand, you made the pass, yes. Christian, can you catch the ball? Yes.
All the stars were aligned and all the muscles fired at the right time, and I was able to get off the ground and throw one down.
I was saving that as a surprise for you.
And now, introducing your host for In All Airness, Adam Ryan.
Welcome to episode 113. Thanks for joining me. I'm excited to welcome Kentucky's Mr. Basketball, Louisville Cardinals Hall of Famer, NBA champion and All-Star, Butch Beard. A huge thanks to great friend of the show, the one and only Peter Vecsey, for connecting me with Butch. One of my favourite conversations yet. Whilst the episode is filled with plenty of laughs and great stories, scattered within are a few shocking moments as Butch paints a picture of life in 1960s Kentucky, the civil rights movement, and his exposure to racism. Show notes for this episode and access to a huge archive of past episodes are available at inallairness.com. Now, onto the show. My guest today has a vast array of achievements and life experiences. He was Mr. Basketball, an NBA All-Star, NBA champion, and 9-year veteran. He's also been a broadcaster and coach. Alfred Butch Beard, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Adam. I'm glad to be here.
I appreciate you chatting with me today. Where does Butch originate from in terms of being known most widely as Butch Beard?
My real name is Alfred Beard Jr., so I'm named after my father. It was an uncle who nicknamed me Butch, and I really didn't know that my name was Alfred until I was in the 8th grade, because I was always known by Butch until a teacher said Alfred Beard, and I was just looking around in the classroom, and somebody said, "That's you, idiot. Raise your hand." So, that's it.
Well, there you go. Just before we chat about your high school years, what sports were you playing when you were a youngster?
I played a little bit of everything. At my high school in Kentucky, they had abolished football, so I played baseball. Hey, you sent me a picture of me in my baseball uniform in high school. I was a pitcher, a catcher, great combination, right? And shortstop. At one time, the St. Louis Cardinals had a scout following me around my sophomore and junior year. And I thought possibly I might end up being a baseball player.
So what led you then to take up basketball and make that your primary goal?
You won't believe this. In baseball, you have practice in the whole 9 yards. That particular day, I was catching, okay? The team was practicing bunting. For some reason, everybody was hitting the ball, and it was just ticking off their bats, and it started to nick me. I turned my head. I got hit in the neck, and I said, that's it. I'm not catching anymore. I'm not pitching anymore. I'm going to play shortstop. That went my baseball career right there on the spot. That was it.
You just decided that was enough and basketball it was going to be.
Well, I was doing both, but I just said, hey, look, I'm not going to continue to do this because that St. Louis Cardinal scout had told me that he liked me as a catcher because of my arm. And I don't know if that much about Major League Baseball, especially back in the 60s, but Tim McCarver, who was a great catcher for the St. Louis Cardinals and also an announcer, he was their number one catcher for St. Louis, and he kept saying, you'll be better than Tim. There's no question in my mind, but no, my career left right after that.
It's interesting what could have been, but obviously when you made basketball your main choice, then of course you've gone on to do some incredible things, which we'll chat about as this conversation unfolds. Now, you attended Breckenridge County High School. I read an article in the Courier Journal, which had the following lead: a man who never played college basketball is coaching a prospect being sought by a legion of colleges. And the coach in question was Don Morris, your high school coach. What can you tell us about Don Morris and the impact that he perhaps had on you and your team during those seasons where you had some outstanding results, which we'll talk about shortly?
Well, you got to understand the times, Adam. It was in the 60s. In the 60s, Breckenridge County had just integrated, all right? And up until my 7th grade, I had always gone to a historical black school, an all-black school, through grade school, middle school, basically. So Coach Morris came along, and he was like a blessing in disguise, because at Breckenridge County, he started 4 black kids. And I know that didn't go over well in that little county, in that little town. It's a little town of 1,400 people. And we were fortunate enough to win a state title, to go back to back. We went my junior year against West Unseld and Louisville Seneca High School, and we lose. And then we come back my senior year and we win the state tournament. To this day, I talked to him and I told him, I said, you don't even know what you did. You dangled that carrot in front of me and I bit off of it, because he kept telling me, he says, you're good enough to at least go to college. If you continue to work, you will get a college scholarship. I never thought that I'd ever play pro ball. I was just trying to get to college to get an education.
Wow. So obviously had a great impact. That's great to hear. In terms of that first meeting with Wes Unseld, when you met them in the final in 1964, I believe it was, in the state tournament.
Right.
They held on for a 10-point win, but you were severely hampered from what I've read in that game due to an adverse reaction to some medication. Do you mind just elaborating on what happened in the previous game and what led to you having not as much impact as you would have hoped in the final?
Oh, you've done a lot of research, haven't you? Well, what happened was this. In the state of Kentucky, they call it the Sweet 16. Okay, they have 16 regions, and there aren't any class. We were a little school of 400 people. Seneca had, I think, about 1,800 people upper grades. And so the game before that morning, we played a team from another county, Allen County, and they pretty much beat me up. I was only 6'2.5", 6'3", 160 pounds, playing as a center. And the officials let the game get so rough that they just beat me up. I got kneed in both knees. By the time I got to the hotel after that morning game, I couldn't walk. Couldn't walk. Now, I'm going to try to help you to see if you can visualize this. For a whole week, they stuck the 16 teams in one hotel in the state tournament. It just so happens that Seneca High School and Breckenridge County were on the same floor. And I got to know Wes because as I was walking down the hall after one of our games, he says, you want to come over and play checkers? So that's how I got to know him. Spent the rest of the week getting to know him and then have to play against him. I had cortisone shots in both knees. Yeah, you're right.
Ouch.
Yeah, right. My high school assistant coach said, look, you act like you're hurt. And I told him, I don't have to act like I'm hurt. I can't walk, okay? So I took the shots. They took me to the hospital 4 hours before the game. We got back to the Memorial Coliseum in Lexington, Kentucky, on the campus of the University of Kentucky. It was so hot. Thank God I did. When I walked in the building, I saw this chair, and I passed out right there. When I woke up, I was in the bowels of Memorial Coliseum, lying on a cot. I had no idea where I was.
Wow.
Finally, I said, I'm doing okay. And I put my uniform on, and I go out. And I'll never forget my teammates. They were happy to see me. I was so out of it, I didn't even know where I was. I remember the first shot I took, it probably went about 4 feet, and I was standing 15 feet from the hoop. I remember one of my teammates coming up to me and said, are you okay? I said, oh, yeah, I'm doing great. So so we lost to them. I don't think we ever would have beaten them because Wes was the best player that I ever played against, and his career, needless to say, is outstanding. we talked about it because Wes and I were roommates in college for 3 years. So he had bragging rights for that. And I always could say, man, if I was healthy, we would have beaten you. But deep down inside, I don't think that would have happened.
That's incredible what you had to go through just to try and get ready to play in that game against Wes. At the time you first met him, did you have any inkling that you might become would-be roommates in college?
Well, you got to understand the times, okay? In 1964, the SEC was trying to integrate, and they wanted the University of Kentucky to be the first basketball team to have a black player. So in 64, they went after Wes Unseld, who was Mr. Basketball the year before me. Wes chose the University of Louisville. Then I came the following year, and they recruited me heavily as well. And there was rumors that I was going, and there's a good possibility I would have gone. But I just didn't believe that Coach Rupp could protect me in the South. And I'll never forget my mother. He came for a home visit, telling all these crazy stories about what they did to the University of Kentucky basketball team because they were the most successful team in the SEC and blah, 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 throwing Coke bottles and all this stuff at them. And I'll never forget, my mother said, Mr. Rupp, do you think you could make sure my son is safe? And he just kept on rattling off stuff. He walked out the door. Now, my mother's 4'11", the strongest woman I've ever been around in my life. She said, you're not going there, Dad, don't you? So I had to change. I had to change thoughts right there on the spot. So that's the reason why I thought about the University of Louisville, because Wes was the best player that I ever played against in my life.
And that says a lot. Thanks for sharing your experiences here. I really do appreciate it. Just before we get to your time at Louisville, in March of 1965, your Breckenridge County Bearcats, I believe you were called, you became Region 4 champions with a 1-point win over Central City. You scored a field goal in the game's final minute to help secure that win. Not only that, I believe you had 26 points in that game. Across the 6 tournament games, you averaged 31 points. And if the stats are correct, you had 26 points and 18 rebounds per contest across that regular season as a high school senior. Some incredible numbers there. Only about a week later, you had a 30-point game and had 14 rebounds to help secure the high school state title with a 95-73 win. So all that said, how did it feel to become state champions? You went 37-3 across the season.
Yeah.
Incredible achievements there.
Yes. The reason why we were 37-3 is because I told you earlier in the conversation, we didn't have football. So in the state of Kentucky, you could play as many high school games, basketball games as you wanted. My high school coach, who coached Mars, he was so far ahead of everybody else, really, in the 60s. Adam, here's what I'm telling you. When district, regional, and then state tournament rolled around, he used to take us and scout the opponents. When I say us, I'm talking about his team. And he would tell us who we would guard, man-to-man, and everything else. And he made us write down a scouting report. Now, that's in the 60s. That's way ahead of time. You understand what goes on now? And he checked everything. If he thought we were wrong, he made sure that we understood what we were supposed to do. So those 2 years, 64 and 65, we won 67 ball games, all right, and lost 8. It's incredible. The team, my junior year, that was 30-5, that played Wes Unseld, they were more talented than my senior team. But the only difference was Butch Beard, who was a senior, would have worn out Butch Beard, who was a junior. Okay? I was a much better player, a much better all-around player. And I discussed that all the time with one of my old teammates in high school. We talk about it all the time.
What do you think was the big difference between the junior season versus your senior season? You said the influence that your coach had. What were you doing to help advance the skills of your game?
He gave me the keys to the gym, and I used to go to the gym all the time and play. And then at night, you have to understand the whole situation where I came from in a little town of 1,400 people. About this time at night here in America, about 10 o'clock, 10:30, I would go in the gym and work by myself until about 11 or 12, until my mother would come and say, hey, man, you got to come and go to bed because you got to get up and go to work tomorrow, okay? And if Coach hadn't given me those keys, I wouldn't have been as good. I stayed in the gym. hours and hours by myself while my classmates were out chasing girls and doing everything else. But I was determined to get better. I wanted that experience to get back to the state tournament because I felt by me being not able to play my junior year, I missed something. So we were fortunate enough to get there my senior year and win it.
Definitely redeemed yourself having the full opportunity to do what you did there in 1965. Now, as far as I understand it, when you were in college back at this time, freshmen couldn't play with the varsity team.
Right.
What was your freshman season like? I believe you averaged almost 30 points per game as a freshman. Is that correct?
I averaged 25 points a game. At that particular time, Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was out at UCLA. We're the same age. He was the first pick in 69. I was the 10th. But anyway, their freshman team was voted the best freshman team in college basketball, which they should have been. We were voted number 2 in the nation at that time. We ended up being 15-1. I forget, someone beat us. I don't know who it was. But it was just interesting to get a feel of the varsity game back then. The guys were a little bit quicker. They were a little bit stronger. So I had to try to make that adjustment because even at 6'3" and 175 pounds, and I played center and forward, I could still overpower a lot of people because I always believed in my ability to get myself into shape to play. That it was Coach Morris always saying, if you're in the better physical shape in the fourth quarter, it will show, and that's where you will take advantage of it.
Your Cardinals in your sophomore season went 23-5. And I read that on December the 3rd of 1966, you set the record for most points in a varsity debut, one that still stands today. You had 27 points in a 99-81 win over Georgetown. A recap of that game from the Courier-Journal opened with the following line: "The firm of Unseld, Holden and Beard set up shop last night at Freedom Hall," which I think is a great line. Wes Unseld, out of interest, had 23 points and 18 rebounds in the victory. Now, you talked briefly about that transition from freshman to sophomore seasons. What was it like to take on and have such a great impact across that first season with the varsity team as a sophomore?
It was different because I think I put my stamp on our ball club. The year before, they were pretty good. But when I came on as a varsity player and the way that I played was entirely different than what they were used to playing. I made us a running ball club. I don't know if you have the photo of that particular article, but I remember it to this day. Have me go into the hoop. Back then, you could dunk, and I dunked on this guy. It may show me cuffing the ball, okay, to dunk over a player. And that was something that the University of Louisville, they never saw that on a continuous basis. That was just the reason why I was different. I want you to know, Adam, my sophomore year, well, I had game, but my sophomore year was really a good year.
Oh, absolutely. I had great fun researching your career. You definitely had some great stuff in college. And I do know the photo you're talking about. I don't know if I sent it to you ahead of our chat. You're going straight to the hoop, about to dunk on some guy. So it's a great photo.
I did something my sophomore year against Wichita State. Came down on the break. Really, that was my trademark. The middleman on the break. Wes Unseld, greatest outlet passer in the world. We used to lay up in bed, and I played forward for 2 years of the 3 that I was a varsity. And Wes used to tell me, he says, you block your man out, count to 3, I'll get it out to you, and you can do your thing. Because Wes didn't like to score. Although he scored, he didn't like to score. And I'll never forget, I was running the break, and I pulled up at the free throw line and shot a jumper, and it hit the back of the rim, went straight up. It went straight up. Next thing, I take 2 good steps, and I'm really above the square. My arms are above the square, and I cuff the ball, and I dunk it. It scared me because I said, holy hell, what did I just do? And I was going back down the floor. Wes said, do you realize what you just did? I said, no, But I could jump, and I could run, and I used that as an asset.
Unbelievable. I've read about a game in January of 1967. You exploded for 41 points. 26 were in the second half in a win against Bradley in Peoria, Illinois. It's the 4th highest individual scoring game in school history. You were 20 of 25 from the field. Do you remember that incredible performance?
Yeah, because as I tell people all the time, I got some former teammates that we Zoom, Dave Gilbert, Eddie Whitehead, Wade Houston. We've been starting to Zoom a little bit more and talk to each other at our old age, especially after Wes Unseld had passed away. And we were talking about that game 2 weeks ago. And I said, well, I did earn the 15 points the first half. The 26 points the second half, Bradley was trying to press. We used Wes in the middle to break the press. He threw the ball to me. It was always a 2-on-1 situation. Either I had a little 8-foot bank shot or my teammate had a little 8-foot bank shot, or we scored on a layup. So the 26 points second half, they were bogus, but I'll take them.
That's a great way to describe it. You were the team's leading scorer at over 20 points per game that season, and you were the Missouri Valley Conference champions, and then you made it to the NCAA tournament before losing out to SMU by 2 points in the region semifinal. How was that first taste of the NCAA tournament?
You had to bring that up. Of all of my college career, I would have to say that particular year, that particular game happened to be the low light. At that particular time, Adam, we were number 2 in the nation to UCLA, okay? The NC2A tournament was going to be played at Louisville at Freedom Hall, which was one of the biggest arenas in the country at that particular time. That's where the University of Louisville played their home games. We never practiced there, but we played there. I honestly thought that we had an opportunity to win an NC2A tournament that year. I thought we were that good until Elvin Hayes, they upset Kareem Newman, probably the game that changed college basketball altogether down in the Houston Astrodome. To this day, I'm still upset that we lost to SMU because that was our ticket to possibly win an NC2A tournament. And then my senior year, we played Southern Methodist down in Dallas, and I lit them up for 31 points, but it didn't matter. We won the game, but that didn't matter.
I can say it still sticks in your craw, obviously.
That one really does. A lot of stuff I let go. That one stays with me for a while.
The other game you referred to there with Houston versus UCLA, was that the game of the century that you're referring to?
Yes, which changed college basketball the way we know it now because they had the big game. And after Houston and Elvin Hayes and them upset UCLA, I don't even think the NC2A wanted anything else but that. But it would have been nice if we had gotten back to Louisville. They would have to make up their mind because they only lost 3 games in 3 years at the University of Louisville in Freedom Hall.
Yeah, great record. I believe you met Elvin Hayes the following season in the NCAA tournament.
Yes, we did. They beat us out of Kansas.
I looked at the stats ahead of our chat today. He had 35 points and 24 rebounds. You had 21 points. Wes had 23 points and 22 boards. They took the victory 91-75. What do you recall from that matchup the following season when you were a junior?
We had a transfer by the name of Mike Grosso, who was the second best big man in the country, who had gone to South Carolina, tore his knee up, okay? And he transferred to Louisville. And we were putting Mike in our system at that time. The coaching staff blamed Mike for, not making the game a little bit closer than what it was. But Mike did what he had to do. The guy who beat us was doggone Ken Spain for Houston, the big center. He had an outstanding game. Wes and E pretty much canceled themselves out. I should have been more aggressive against Don Chaney. I should have been more aggressive and tried to score about 30 points that night instead of just playing and staying within the scheme of things. So I blame myself a little bit because in games that I knew that I had to perform a little bit better than I normally did, and when I did, we won the big games, I should have been more aggressive. I really should have, because Wes wasn't a scorer. He wasn't going to score as many points as he. But as you said, he got 23 or 24 rebounds. That's what Wes did, okay? That was Wes Unseld. That should have been me. I should have been more aggressive scoring-wise.
So all these years on, how often do you sort of reflect back on some of these games?
Only when I'm asked about them. I discuss them sometimes with my kids. They're all old like I am. So we sit around, we talk about we talk about basketball. But sometimes I talk about it because I knew how much of an impact I had on our team in the way that I played.
Well, as a senior, you were named the team co-captain, I believe, with Jerry King. and you averaged 20.6 points a game, and you led the Cardinals to a 21-6 record. You took part in the National Invitation Tournament, defeating Fordham 73-70. And in that game, I read that you had 23 points and you made 6 key free throws in the last 72 seconds. You bowed out in the second round against Boston College. What was memories come back to mind when you think of your final games in college there?
It was rigged.
It was rigged?
It was rigged.
In what way?
Do you know who the coach was of Boston College at that time?
Bob Cousy.
It was the great Bob Cousy. It was at Madison Square Garden where I finally came to work later on in my career. It was rigged.
Well, the final score, I believe, was 88-83. So what do you think led to it being rigged?
We didn't get a call down the stretch at all. Are you kidding me? We got no calls. None whatsoever. Didn't get a call. We should have moved on. We really should have. Here's what I did do, Adam. After that game, I retired my jersey. I retired my jersey. You go on the road, you have your home jersey and you have your away jersey. So it was the away game for us. We were in our red uniform. The team doctor's son, I gave it to him. I says, we're retiring that jersey. So he has it to this day. Jimmy Ellis in Louisville, Kentucky. When I see him, he talks about it all the time. He framed his. I didn't frame mine. I kept it, and then eventually I gave it to one of my kids, and I don't know where it is now. As you can see over my shoulder, you see that? See that cardinal up there?
Yes, I can.
I'm in my office, okay? So I'm a cardinal till the end, all right?
You're referring to your number 14, is that right?
Yes. So I retired my jersey. Coach Drummond and Coach Hickman, they were the coach. They told me back then, you got $15 for a laundry check. You talking about players getting paid. That was it, man. We got a $50 laundry check, okay? I told them, man, y'all keep that check. I said, I don't need that check, okay? I didn't give them the jersey back, and they never gave me another check.
What was it like to play in Madison Square Garden? Was that the first time you'd played there?
Yeah, I had played in the old Madison Square Garden. I had never played in the new Madison Square Garden until that time. And I did play there. And let me tell you, of all the places that I've played basketball, and that includes Freedom Hall, which I loved, Madison Square Garden is the greatest place in the world to play. And you want to know why?
I do, yes.
Okay, here's the reason why, Adam. Most arenas that you go to, what do? You go down, right? You go into the building and you work your way down, right? Madison Square Garden, you jump on the escalators and you go 8 flights up, and then you get to the arena. And that's what makes it so great. That's what makes it so different. Right now, I live in New York, and I get little goosebumps every time I go into Madison Square Garden because it's so different. It's so different. And it makes you want to play. It makes you want to play.
An incredible venue. In 1994, I had a quick trip over to the USA, and I went to see the Knicks play the 76ers at Madison Square Garden, and it was just a tremendous experience. And then in 2017, my wife and I headed back over, and we saw the 76ers and Knicks again at Madison Square Garden. Big highlight of the trip. Incredible atmosphere.
You remember, you see, you came into the front of the building. Next thing, the tickets. Then you jumped on an escalator and you started to work your way up, and that's how you got into the building.
That's correct. Yeah.
So every other place you go into a building, you work your way down. This one, you go in, and then when you look up, you look up again. It's such a huge place. It still reminds you, you said, wow, you're in a big arena, but it's 8 stories up. It's 8 stories up.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And we'll get to your years inside Madison Square Garden a little bit later as well. Per the 2020 Louisville Media Guide, you left college with averages of 19 points and 6.3 rebounds per game. You're currently ranked 17th all-time in career points, and better yet, you're second all-time in career points for a 3-year player. So some great achievements there at Louisville. Just in terms of the NBA draft, which was forthcoming in 1969, the Atlanta Hawks selected you with the 10th overall pick. You mentioned how Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, formerly Lou Alcindor, went number 1 to Milwaukee. What was your draft day experience like? How did it unfold for you?
The day that I got drafted, I was out at the University of Louisville working out. That's how it was. My eligibility was up. I moved out of the dorm. I was staying at my aunt's house trying to finish school. I walked in and she said, somebody from the Atlanta Hawks was calling here. I said, for what? She said, you just got drafted. So they left a number. I called back and they told me they drafted me. And that started my career. I never thought in terms of that I would get drafted, but that's what it was. I tell my kids the reason why I tell the story. I said, 10th player chosen in 1969. That means I was a lottery pick in today's business. Man, I would never have to work a day in my life. I'm a 10 to maybe a $15 million player a year.
It's incredible, isn't it, the amount of money that the players now get walking straight into the NBA from college, or not even sometimes going to college, compared to back in this era.
That is the truth. We laugh about that a lot because of the mere fact that it was a big thing, but it wasn't show business like it is now.
The ABA draft was held barely a week later. The Dallas Chaparrals selected you in the ABA draft. What rights, if any, did they actually have relating to you having been picked by the Atlanta Hawks?
Well, Adam, can you keep a secret? You think anybody's listening?
Oh, there's a few people listening, but I'll keep a secret.
All right, here's the deal. I'm drafted 10th in the NBA. At that particular time, the ABA was trying to get started. And right after my last game at home, the owners of the Kentucky Colonels sat down with me and wanted me to say that I would be an ABA player. They were actually bargaining and trying to get me to play in the ABA. I told them that I have waited this long, that I want to see what happens in both drafts and then make up my mind. Okay? Why not? Plus, they dropped some money on a table in my aunt's house that I had to walk away from. I had to walk away at that particular time. It was my first wife. We were young, dumb, but we were dating. I wasn't married, but that was my girlfriend. We went into another room. And I said, my God, I'll never see that kind of money again in my life. Should I go ahead and take it? Because if I had taken the money, it would have meant that the Kentucky Colonels would have drafted me and I would have played for them. I had a problem playing in the ABA and with the Colonels. I just wanted to see the whole draft thing. So when I turned them down, I think they went out and they told everybody that I had signed to play with the NBA, which I hadn't done. All right. Thus the reason why I get drafted in the 7th round by the Dallas Chaparrals. And they never called me. I knew I got drafted, but that was it.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that story. I won't tell anybody.
Okay. You know too much about me as it is.
I've been doing a bit of research, but obviously I had no idea about that. But I did wonder whether the Kentucky Colonels would play some part in trying to lure you to the ABA, given that you are from Kentucky and you're a star at Louisville, etc. So, yeah, that's fascinating to hear. Thanks for sharing it.
That's the reason why the disparity from the first round in the NBA to the 7th round in the ABA. I'm sure that they went out. Amy and Gregory Brown, I think that was their names. You'll probably research it. But they were the owners, and they came and they dropped this money down on this table. And I walked away from it. And starving to death to this day. I didn't have a dime and just had enough money to have in my little red Mustang.
Well, in terms of your rookie season in the NBA, you played with the Atlanta Hawks. You had 72 regular season games, and you saw action in each of the team's 10 playoff games.
Mm-hmm.
The Lakers eliminated you in the West Final. What stands out most from your rookie season in the NBA, Butch?
Well, I had the greatest mentor to be a professional than anybody I could ever think of. You'll know the name, Walt Hazzard, who played at UCLA. He was starting point guard for the Atlanta Hawks. And he showed me how to be a professional and be a professional player. He showed me on game days, especially on the road, how to get off your feet, what time to go eat, get your rest, make sure you're ready to play. And here's the one thing, Adam, he told me that stuck in my mind, and it's always been there. He says, Butch, you're not going to like all your teammates. You can have disagreements all you want. Sometimes wives get involved and they try to mess up stuff. But he says, the minute you step on that court with your teammates, all of that goes away. It's just us against whoever we're playing against. And so that right there had always been the way that I thought when I went to 5 teams in the NBA.
Wise words, hey?
Yeah. We ate at 2:00 on game day on the road. It was always room service. Always took a nap in the afternoon because of him. Back then, when I got up, always went and had breakfast. Nothing heavy. It was always oatmeal, just something light. Okay. He said, the reason why you eat this early is because when you get to the arena, you don't want to be full. You want to be hungry. Okay. You want to feel like you're hungry. That'll make you lighter. That was his thought process behind all of that. He was the greatest mentor that I ever had in my life.
Obviously made a massive impact on you and held you in good stead.
Yes, he did.
In March of 1970, Pete Maravich was drafted by Atlanta.
Yes.
Did you cross paths with Pistol before the upcoming expansion draft?
Here's how all that works out. You had the Vietnam conflict. You had the Atlanta Hawks coming from St. Louis, and they come to Atlanta to play. Lou Hudson, who was the star guard for the Hawks, came from St. Louis. But again, we had the Vietnam conflict or war. He was in the National Guards in St. Louis. That particular time, they weren't letting any blacks in the National Guards in Georgia. The Hawks had a connection in St. Louis, so I kept going to meetings in St. Louis. Back home where I'm from in Kentucky, one of my teammates' mother ran the draft board. Her son decided that he wanted to up and go to Nam. So she stuck me in there. I had already gone to meetings in St. Louis. I was in the National Guards. The Hawks lose, okay, to the LA Lakers. And the game before, I had my career high as a player. I scored 22 points, thought I'd won the game for us. And John Trasvant, who played for the Lakers, hit a shot and they beat us. That game that we lost that I'm talking about, I go back to the hotel and my phone it's off the hook. I called my wife. I said, what happened? She said, you got drafted. I said, how could I get drafted? I said, I've been going to meetings in St. Louis. So I called the general manager who was with us, and I called the head coach, Richie Guerin, at that time, who was a great player and a great one as far as the Knick history is concerned. He's a great player, and he helped me to be a professional as well. We started to send paperwork back and forth, but she wouldn't let it go. So I had to go back to Kentucky, and that's how I got to be in the Army for the expansion draft from Atlanta. And so they picked me up. Then they drafted Pete Maravich, okay? I get an early out. We play the Atlanta Hawks, and I'm in Cleveland. I'll never forget my first game against them. I took it personally. They beat us because we weren't very good. We were an expansive team, but I warmed Pete up pretty damn good. Okay. I really did. It wasn't because of him. He later got me back as a Knick when he scored 61 points against Walt and me and anybody else who was trying to guard him. Okay. But that's how all that came about. I've had a lot of crazy things happen to me in my lifetime when it comes to basketball. And that was by far the craziest thing that I've ever had happened to me, because I thought I was already in the National Guards, and I thought I was ending up going to Vietnam after I got drafted. I got fortunate enough. I stayed at Kentucky, stayed at Fort Knox. I played basketball and got an early out, and therefore that's how my basketball career as a professional took off.
Thank you so much for sharing the details there. I can't even imagine how I'd feel if I was in your situation to go through that and have the military service be drafted like that. How did you feel initially when you were first stationed at Fort Knox for what was possibly going to be coming in terms of heading overseas?
Adam, I really didn't know, because when I got to basic, you got to understand, I'm 22 years old, and all of a sudden I'm around kids. I'm talking about 16, 17, little boys from up in the mountains of Kentucky. They'd never been away from home in their life. So my drill sergeant made me the company leader, and I had a room to myself, all right, which kind of broke the ice a little bit, okay? The first morning after being in basic, at 4:00, all of a sudden I hear this garbage can being thrown down the middle of the barracks. And this guy screaming and hollering, you get up, calling us everything up under the sun. And I'm saying, oh my God, what the hell is going on? So we get up and I go out, but Sergeant Daughtry, who I'll never forget, another guy who influenced me, was a lifer. He had like 5 tours. He was just coming back basic. He wanted to go back. He made me the team leader. I was a good soldier, okay? I marched our company when we graduated from basic. He let me do it. And at that particular time, when we were going through basic training, I didn't know if I was going to NAM or not, okay? So everybody that was in my company that weren't National Guard members or reservists, they all got papers to go to Fort Polk, and that was infantry, and they went straight to NAM after that. I was the only one that didn't go.
Mm. It's like a real sliding doors moment, isn't it, as to what could have happened, stating the obvious, but that's, incredible.
Just crazy. I'm telling you.
Thank you very much for opening up about that as well. You talked about playing some basketball whilst you were stationed at Fort Knox. I read that you took part in the Kentuckiana Basketball Association.
I was playing everywhere then. Adam, although I was in the Army, I really wasn't in the Army. You know what I'm saying? I did my duties as a soldier. I tried to play basketball as much as I possibly could because I was trying to keep my skill level up. So when I got it out, I could go straight back to, at that time, Cleveland. I was everywhere. One
of the particular things I came across in researching for our chat today, in November of 1970, you had a 34-point game for a team called Kurtz AC of the Kentuckiana Basketball Association. Obviously, you were getting around playing hoops wherever you could. Returning back to the NBA, 1972 with the Cavaliers, it was just their second season in existence. As you said, they're an expansion team, and you were led by Coach Bill Fitch. From an individual standpoint, even though the team went 23-59, you had probably your best season as a pro, 15.4 points, 4.1 rebounds, and almost 7 assists per game, and you were also named an All-Star. What stands out most from that one on-court season that you had in Cleveland, Butch?
Well, the mere fact that I was in the Army, I got an early out, and I was able to make the NBA All-Star team when I came out. At that particular time, being an expansion ball club, everybody on the team, we were all looking to try to find our little niche in the game. And I don't know, my teammates, when I got out, they made me team captain. So they felt that I was old enough to deal with Coach Fitch, who was just starting. Those were interesting times. I'm grateful that it happened. I had another teammate who I played with, Austin Carr, who was the best player in the country at that time, who had gone to Notre Dame. And I played with another guy by the name of John Johnson at Iowa, who helped the Seattle Supersonics win a championship later on. So as John Johnson is, JJ, that's my guy. God bless him, he's gone. But, Butch, I'm going to make you good. That's what he was good, though. JJ was good. He knew how to play.
Ahead of our chat today, I just watched highlights of the 1972 All-Star game. You were the first player introduced onto the floor at the Forum in LA. What do you remember about that All-Star appearance? You stood out there ahead of everybody else coming out onto the floor. It was the famous game where Jerry West, who was the MVP,
It cost me $500, man, hitting that shot.
West hit a late jump shot with only seconds left to ice the game. I think it was 112 to 110. But you're playing with some absolute all-time greats. What was that experience like when you reminisce on it? Have you watched that game at all recently? It is available to watch on YouTube.
My kids watch. I don't watch. Here's what I remember more than anything else. You're in the service. You're in the Army for 15 months. You get an opportunity to get out to play, and the next thing you know, you're at the All-Star break. Here I am. I'm walking to the locker room. My coach is Red Holzman. My locker is next to Walt Frazier. Dave DeBuscher is across from me. Thank God my college roommate and teammate, Wes Unseld, is there. Are you getting the picture here?
Absolutely.
I'm looking and I'm saying, damn, should I ask for their autograph or what? Really, it was the biggest thrill of all. So we're sitting there going through pregame, And Red says, they're bigger than we are, but I need somebody to get the boards for us. And DeBuscher says, well, if there's a leading rebounder, what do they get out of it? Red says, you get a case of beer. Dave says, put it in my locker. DeBuscher, he was our leading rebounder that night, okay? And Red had his six-pack in his locker. Those were the good old days. Those were the good old days. They really were. But I just sat and I watched and I tried to pick up and I tried to learn, because these are the guys that I had been watching for 15 months. Some of these guys I had watched as I was coming up because it was my second year in the league. It's like a dream come true.
What a transformation from being in the military service, watching these guys on TV, and then actually playing alongside them in an all-star game the following season. I'm
telling you, it really was. And I had another experience while I was in the Army before I got out. I'm working. I find out through the Army and the NBA I can get an early out. So I'm working in this gym. I worked at a battalion headquarters in a message center, which you didn't do anything. You took mail to everybody in the headquarters, and that's all you did. So I see the Post newspaper, and Johnny Bench is on camp. He's there on base, but the Cincinnati Reds are flying him back and forth. They have a home series, so they're flying him from Fort Knox to Cincinnati back, okay? So I'm shooting one day. There was a stage, and the ball goes up on the stage and under the curtains, so I go get my ball, right? I'm retrieving my ball. There's this dude laying on a cot, on a mat, sleeping. I look at it. It looks like Johnny Bench. No, that's not Johnny Bench. So I'm still doing my thing. He wakes up. He comes out, and it is Johnny Bench. So we start talking. And so I'm telling him eventually who I am. I know who he is. And he's the nicest guy in the world. He really is. He starts shooting with me every day and things like that. And they come, the Reds would have a helicopter. They'd pick him up and he'd go play, come back. And I got to know him, and he finally said, hey, look, you want to come to a Reds game? Now, Louisville, Kentucky, Fort Knox is about 2.5-hour drive to Cincinnati. So I get to know the big red machine when they were really good. You understand? Now, that's big. That's big. I have 5 autographs. One of them happens to be a baseball Johnny Bench signed right now. I don't collect that many autographs, but it's right here in my office.
That says a lot, doesn't it?
Yes.
Did you talk about your previous baseball and how you're getting followed around by a scout back in your days?
Hey, I'd already given that up, okay? Johnny Bench, he had some meat hooks on him. He could hold about 5 or 6 baseballs in one hand. He had meat hooks. He really did. He honestly thought he was a good basketball player, but he really wasn't. Okay.
You might have taught him a few lessons on the basketball court.
Yeah.
Now, I read that in August of 72, the Cavaliers traded you to Seattle for Barry Clemens and most notably would-be 9-time All-Star and future Hall of Famer Lenny Wilkens. He'd spent the previous 4 seasons in Seattle, and I've heard you say on some previous podcast appearances that your lone season in Seattle was probably the low light of your NBA career. Can you point to any particular moment with the Sonics that illustrates that point?
Yeah. The whole thing was bad. The whole thing was bad all the way across. For me, it was. And for Lenny as well. When I got traded, I didn't know how all of it came down. I fly into Seattle and I get the Sunday paper and I'm starting to read. Well, he gets traded. He doesn't know about it. He was out playing golf and the organization did a poor job of letting him know what was going on. The city took it out on me. Understand, Seattle now, you have Seattle, you have the Seahawks. Back then, you had the baseball team, the Mariners were there, okay, that moved to Milwaukee, that now they're the Brewers, all right? And you had the Supersonics. It just so happens that you only had the 2 sports before the Seahawks got there, as the baseball team and the Supersonics. It got so bad. This was another down in my career. It got so bad that I had ground beef like spread all over my car. I'm at home. I had a little Asian girl who, for whatever reason, she kind of liked Butch Beard and the way he played. I used to give her tickets to the game because my wife was pregnant with our second son, Corey, And she used to protect my car because people would put ground beef all over it. It got so bad that I went in and told them after it was over, I said, look, you all can do one or two things. You can trade me. If you don't trade me, okay, I'm not coming back. I know I have another year left on my contract, but I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back to this. Our last game for the Sonics that year was in Seattle. I slept in Portland. I wanted out of the state of Washington. We had already moved our furniture back to Kentucky. We were living in a hotel the last week. I wanted out. And thank God they gave me an opportunity to get out to get to the Golden State.
That's terrible to hear. That stuff was happening whilst you were there through no fault of your own, just because of the fact, I guess, that one of their favourite sons in Lenny Wilkins was traded. Terrible.
Yep. And when Lenny came back the first time, I had been starting. As you start the forwards and the centers and then the guards, they were all revving up to wear me out. The coach at that time, Tom Nosocki, never told me he wasn't starting me, okay? So I was ready to run out on the floor, and he started another player. What a mess.
Well, by contrast, how was it to arrive in Golden State following the trade away from Seattle?
Had no expectations. I was just glad to get out of the state of Washington, out of Seattle. In 73, 74, just trying to fit in, still trying to find my little niche in basketball. I've been traded 3 straight times in a row. At that particular time, the Warriors had an older team with Nate Thurman, Clyde Lee, Jeff Mullins, Jim Barnett, Rick Barry. It was an older team. I was actually playing to try to prove something to people. So the last 15 games, I think I averaged pretty close to about 15, 16 points a game. I don't know what I did for the season, but I think that told them that I was capable of playing for them, which helped us the following year to win a championship.
Across the season, he played 79 games. The team went 44-38, just missed the playoffs, but you averaged 10.2 points, almost 5 rebounds and 4 assists a game. Good numbers there. In 1975, the championship season, we'll get to the finals in a moment. Along the way, you disposed of your former team, Seattle, 4-2 in the playoffs. Was there a particular satisfaction in that from your point of view, given what we've already talked about?
It was great satisfaction in that because we won up in Seattle. They were in the arena by the Needle, and you had to walk way back to get to the dressing room. Funny, nobody knows about this. When we won, we're running off the floor. And, of course, my teammate, who everybody loves but loved to hate, Rick Barry, he was mouthing at somebody as we were running through this doggone tunnel, and some chick pours a beer on him. He turns, to get to her and her boyfriend. Her boyfriend is getting ready to clock Rick, and I clock him. I mean, I wore him out. Blood went everywhere, okay?
Oof.
Now, there's 6 of us at this particular junction fighting our way to the locker room. We get to the locker room, and 6 of us are in the locker room. The other 6 still out, in the middle of the doggone floor. They couldn't get through the tunnel. So we had this guy by the name of Hal Childs. He was a PR guy who worked for the Warriors, but also was a Seattle native. He walks in and he says, "Don't worry, these are my people. I'll go and get your teammates," right? So we're back in the locker room, and all of a sudden you hear, like, holy hell is broken out. In the middle of the hallway, I mean, screaming, hollering, cops. It was crazy. The other 6, they were fighting their way to the locker room. NBA will never tell you this. So we go back out, and now we're helping our teammates, at that particular time. That's the reason why you have security the way you do at NBA games. But anyway, we go back, and we fight our way back to the locker room again, all 12 of us. Clifford Ray, who, if you take a picture of him and you say, man, that's the toughest guy I've ever seen in my life, he wouldn't bust a grape. The cops had some guy with handcuffs on, and he was laying up against the wall, and Clifford runs up and starts to beat the snot out of him. I said, "Oh, that's real big of you." "Really, Clifford?" "Yeah, that's good, okay?" So when it was all said and done, Adam, about an hour and a half after the game, we wanted to leave the arena. We couldn't leave because at that Coliseum is where I told you about the parking lot for my car. That's where all the cars were parked, and so was our team bus. The fans would not let us get on the bus. They were that upset. Now, it got so bad that the officials who called the game, Richie Powers, I forget who the other two were, they got on the bus with us. And this was the only time I feared for my life. We finally get on the bus, and the fans start pushing, and that bus started rocking back and forth. And I said, what the hell are we doing on the bus? Let's get off and fight. Go back inside, do something. Why are we here? Finally, the cops got it cleared away, and we got away. That was in 1975. You'll never hear about it, but it's a true story. And thus the reason why I think you have security the way you have it in NBA games was because of that.
Wild scenes, to say the least.
Only time I was really afraid for my life. It was crazy. I'm glad they didn't start to throw rocks or anything like that.
Absolutely. Wow, that's wild. Before we talk about the NBA Finals, you met a tough Chicago Bulls team in the Western Conference Finals, the series that went to a seventh and deciding game at home. You held on to win 83-79 and then made it to the NBA Finals against the Washington Bullets. All these years on, where would that rank within your memory as how tough that was?
For us, beating Chicago and getting to the finals was a little bit tougher because it went 7 games. We ran a play that we practiced all year long, and George Johnson, who's a big center, a shot blocking center, came off of a pick. I'll never forget it. There was a timeout. I wasn't in the game, and Al was talking, and I said, why don't we run 23X, okay? I said, nobody's ever seen it. They're going to jump on Rick, and I said, Noopy is going to dive to the hoop. He's going to be wide open, and he's going to score without any problems whatsoever. Sure enough, he did. So Al said, why not? Let's do it. Al was good at that because he would always ask for input, and that was good. So when I said it and Al said it, and they went out on the floor, I turned to Noopy and I grabbed him. I said, Noops, you better catch that damn ball. I'm telling you now. You don't catch that damn ball. I said, don't you even go to that locker room. I'm going to beat you myself. Okay. But George Johnson caught it, dunked it. We end up winning it. And for us, we felt that we could compete with the Bullets. They had beaten us 3 out of 4 times during the year. And we felt that we could compete with them, even though they were the better team record-wise. But we felt that we were better.
You guys were 48-34.
We were 48-34. They were like 60-22 or something like that.
You're right, spot on. They were 60-22. They had the home court advantage. Even so, you swept them 4-0 to win the title. I just watched the end of Game 4 today before we chatted, and you had 16 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and 3 steals in that clinching game. It was a 1-point win, 96-95 at Washington. You also grabbed the biggest rebound of your career with about 9 seconds left in the game.
Yes.
What comes to mind when you reflect back on that NBA championship, particularly that Game 4 and the final moments?
Well, I had struggled in that series a lot. I had tendonitis so bad that nobody knew about. I couldn't practice in between games. They didn't have the treatment process that they have now. So I was just trying to stay afloat so I could play. What you don't know, Adam, is my 2 years at Golden State, I was the number 1 percentage-wise shooting guard in the NBA. The year before, I was behind Don Nelson and somebody else and Rudy Tomjanovich. And the 75 year, I was still number 1. I think I shot about 53%. I'm not sure. But anyway, I had struggled in that series so much. I had all the shots that I wanted, just didn't hit them. And you read those stats. But see, I scored our last 7 points and nobody talks about it.
It was great to watch, just knowing that I was speaking to you. I thought, oh, wow, this is great. You had such a big role in those final minutes. And then when Rick Barry grabbed you after that rebound that you'd got in the last 9 seconds, that was fantastic.
Well, here we go. Grab the rebound. All year long, we had this contest who had the highest percentage shooting free throws. Of course, nobody was going to beat Rick, 95% free throw shooter. I think I shot about 85%. I had a good year. So Rick, remember seeing him pat me on the rear end. He said, these are yours, okay? I had no problem with it either. Thank God they had the best 2 out of 3, or else I would have been one hell of a goat. The first one, I was thinking about it. I really knew what it meant. The second one, I had calmed down, and when I missed it, if you noticed my reaction, me slapping the floor.
Yeah, you've been right down and put your hands behind your back.
I just couldn't believe I missed the shot. After I do that, I turned it and I see Rick. Now he turns his back on me, right? He's standing at midcourt. He turns his back on me. This is my teammate. He turns his back on me. So thank God I did hit the third one there. I hit, and, we won the championship. I said, Lord, an 384% shooter and couldn't take that pressure. That's what it was. Couldn't take that pressure.
You made the one that counted, and that put you up by 3. And then I think Wes Unseld got a consolation tip in just before the final siren.
That rebound was over Wes and E because they were tired. Neither one of them could jump. I didn't jump that high either, but I got off the floor quicker than they did.
Yeah, that's true. Early in Game 4, the Bullets' Mike Reardon basically mugged Rick Barry, which led to a skirmish that involved Wes Unseld and your coach, Al Addles. What do you remember of that moment?
Al Addles told the story that he had gone out to dinner the night before and he had heard that the Bullets were going to do something to try to get Rick out of the game because Rick had warmed them up real good all 3 games up until then. So he came out to protect Rick. He didn't want Rick to be thrown out of the game. That's the reason why Al was out there running around trying to get to Reardon. Now, understand something. You didn't want to mess with the destroyer. That's Al Addles. He had already a reputation in the NBA. Now, he had knocked out some people during his playing days, big guys, okay? And that's the reason why Wes tried to stand there and be the big tough guy. When all of that settled down, we walked into our benches. I walked past Wes. I said, Wes, you're lucky that Al didn't knock you out. Just like that, Wes said. He wasn't going to touch me. I said, well, I would. And he laughed. He said, I know you came with me. So
It was pretty wild. What did it feel like to be an NBA champion as you headed back into the locker rooms there? We see a bit of coverage. Rick Barry and Al Addles get interviewed, I think, by Brent Musburger. How did it feel to be back in that locker room celebrating your first NBA championship?
It felt good because you don't get there very often. And then when you do get there, you don't finish the deal. We were very fortunate to do both, get there and finish the deal. I had a former player, Bill Bridges, who I broke into the league with. He was the team captain for the Atlanta Hawks. And we had picked him up specifically for the Chicago series to guard Chet Walker or Bob Love. And he did his job in that series, which made me feel really, really, really good. Little locker room, and you saw the celebration and everything. And Bill came up to me. He said, we don't win this series if you don't come alive in Game 3 and Game 4. He says, without you, we don't win it. And he gave me a hug. Now, Bill Bridges was as hard on me 9 years before that you had ever seen as a rookie. But that made me feel so good. It was unbelievable. Now, here's the other part that your listeners will get an opportunity to know. That game was in the afternoon, a Sunday afternoon. Back then, you didn't have traveling secretaries. You didn't have a private plane waiting on you. You had to go commercial. When we got on the bus to go over to the game, the traveling secretary happened to be our trainer, Dick D'Oliva. And everybody was telling Dick, we want a flight out of here tonight. We're not coming back and playing another game. So Dick, after he got everybody taped, when we had a pregame talk and all, he was getting us reservations. He got us out of Washington, D.C. We had to go over to Dulles to fly to San Francisco commercially, but we got out of there. Now, what does that tell you about how confident we thought we were of winning the championship?
Very confident.
Everybody checked out of the damn hotel except our damn superstar, Rick Barry. He didn't check out, okay? Everybody else checked out. We had to go back to the hotel, wait until he checked out, and then we went on over to Dulles and got out of D.C.
You mentioned Rick there as the guy that everybody loved to hate in terms of not his teammates, but everybody else. I was fortunate to have Rick on the podcast quite a few years ago now, and I couldn't have found him any more entertaining and enlightening when I spoke to him. Obviously, that's only a short interaction, but he has a reputation, I believe, that's unwarranted most of the time from back in his playing days, being teammates with him for 2 years and obviously knowing him over all these years. What have you made of your time playing with Rick and in the years since?
Oh, here's the thing, Adam. The 75 championship team is very close. to this day, okay? We've lost 5 players from that team, but we're very close. If I show you my phone, you will see Rick, Jeff, Clifford Ray, Jamal. We all still talk to one another. Charles Dudley, who was on that team, sent out an email May 25. I think that's when we won the 4th game. Said, hey, it's been 45 years, whatever it is. Rick comes back, and this is how much he has evolved as a person and as a man. He says, listen, greatest year of my life. I'm so happy that you were my teammates. Y'all took a lot of what from me, and I just want to say that I'm sorry for that, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And I'll never forget, I wrote Rick an email right after, seeing the email. I said, it's kind of nice to see that you've grown up and being a part of us. Rick Barry, very misunderstood. One of the best players that I ever played with, and I played with some great players. He understood the game better than anybody that I know. He was just misunderstood. He really was. He goes down as one of the greatest players the NBA has ever had. But people just don't want to recognize it because of his demeanor on the floor. He was a little bit of a crybaby, but he could play. Rick Barry could play.
That's a great description. Misunderstood is probably the word I was looking for when I was talking about him prior to that question. Now, Peter Vecsey posed a great question ahead of our chat today, and I'd like to ask it to you now, if you don't mind. You went from being a starter on the Golden State Warriors to, in the off-season, being traded to Cleveland Cavaliers. I think it was for Dwight Davis and some future picks.
Right.
After starting each game in the 75 finals, but then not being part of the Warriors the following season. How did that feel, and what do you think led to the trade back to Cleveland briefly before you headed on to New York, where you finished out your career?
I've been on both sides of the fence. I've been on management side, and I've been a player. I'm just going to leave that alone. I have no idea why they thought that they could trade me that soon. Now, if you look at the history of the Golden State Warriors of that 75 ball club, see, they got rid of me and also Charles Johnson. We were the starting backcourt. Now, I know that they drafted Phil Chenier and Gus Williams. I do a little radio show in Louisville, Kentucky, and I had Rick on, and he said he thought we could have gone back-to-back if I had stayed instead of them trading me. And I know the reason why, because, see, I distributed the ball to Rick when he needed to shoot. You understand? One of my nicknames was Doc because it was Jamal Wilkes that says, when you run our offense, you're like a doctor. It's precision. You make sure you get everybody involved, which I did. It's like you carving everybody up. The only person that could probably tell us that is Al Adams, and I don't know if he'll ever tell you. I don't know why they did what they did. I would have loved to have had another opportunity to see if we could go back-to-back because they had a great year. They just got upset by Phoenix in the second round of the playoffs.
A question, I guess, that we'll ponder for some time. But yeah, thank you for elaborating. On December the 1st of 1975, after 15 games with the Cavs, you were claimed on waivers by the New York Knicks. And as I mentioned, that's where you played the rest of your playing career in New York. What was it like to leave Cleveland and then play for Red Holzman and New York?
Oh, man, no, man. I go back to Cleveland, and after winning the championship, and Bill Fitch doesn't see how I can help him in any way, and they haven't won anything, although they had a very good ball club, okay? They were just starting to come around. And that upset me, too, because I can help one team win a championship and can't play for another one. Again, my career is really interesting in this sense. I got let go Thanksgiving night. The Cleveland Cavaliers were playing the Chicago Bulls out at Richfield Coliseum in Ohio near Akron. I get traded, okay? Thanksgiving Day. I don't see my family. I was in Cleveland by myself. They come up for Thanksgiving. My wife has cooked a big dinner and everything, and we were going to eat after the game. And we have shoot around that morning. They could have told me they were going to trade. I've been traded too many times. And they could have told me, okay? They don't tell me. I have my family, my kids. I hadn't seen them since camp. I walk in the arena, and Jimmy Rogers, who was Bill Fitch's assistant, asked me to go upstairs to talk to Bill. So I go up to the office, talk to him. He says, well, I'm cutting you, but you're going to be picked up. And I said, Bill, let me tell you something. You're saying that I'm not good enough to help you, but I could help another ball club win a championship 5 months ago? He says, don't worry about it. You're going to be picked up. Then he wanted to be cordial. And I said, Bill, if you put your hands on me, so help me God, either you're going to kick my butt here or I'm going to kick yours, because this does not make any sense whatsoever. Okay? I walk back down, get on the elevator. I go down into the locker room. They had already had my stuff in a box. My kids, they were young. What's going on? So they had cleared out my locker, and that was it. So again, another time in my career where none of this makes any sense to me. Am I pissed about it? Yes. Yes, I am. I'll take that to my grave, too.
Sounds like they handled it very badly.
They handled it worse than very badly. After the game, I called Austin, who was a team captain, and I called Campy Russell. I said, Austin, did you know about it? He said, well, Bill called me that afternoon and said they were going to trade. I said, why the hell didn't you call me? I never would have driven back out to Richfield. They could have done whatever they wanted to do. Why do y'all make me go out there with my family for the first time? They hadn't seen me, since September, and now you're going to talk? Oh, come on, Austin, please. Well, that's it. It turned out the best.
What was it like then, by contrast, heading to New York and then playing under Red Holzman in the subsequent seasons that followed?
First of all, I thought Bill was lying to me, and I don't know if he'd had some deal. Well, I got back to Louisville, and my agent was calling around. I do know that the Boston Celtics, they were interested, and the Knicks were interested. I think the Knicks had first dibs to me. So he got a call from Eddie Donovan. And so therefore, the rest is history. I end up coming to New York. Now, after I get to New York, I don't know the impression that I had made on Red Holzman, because when I get there, they actually are playing the Boston Celtics. I get there in the afternoon, and I stay in the hotel across the street from the Garden. Dick Barnett comes and gets me. He's an assistant coach at the time, and he starts to go over their offense on the board. And he says, 2-3-F is, I said, yeah, that's for your forward. He said, what are you talking about? I said, I'll show you. I said, I've been traded so many times, I actually look at the scouting reports, okay? So I don't know if that influenced Red toward me as a coach. I have no idea. But when Red came back after being a coach and I was cut by Willis, Red wanted me back as an assistant coach. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
What was it like to have that season where Willis had replaced Red as coach? I think that was the 1979 season. And then he briefly coached into the following season before being replaced again by Red. Right. How did you go under Willis Reed for that 1 year, which was your final season where you might have only played, I think, 7 games in total?
They were on a youth movement. I was 31 years old. I was the oldest guy on the team. When we go to camp, I'll never forget. I had done everything I'd always done all my life, all my career. I had prepared myself for the season. I go to camp, and we had to go run a mile. I was first. Everything we did physically, I was first. I had to show them 31 years old, you're not over the hill. I was first. And the year before, I had helped Will, okay? I helped Will to get into playoffs. We lose to Philadelphia. So again, I don't know what the hell was on their mind, all right? I really don't. It doesn't make any sense to me. All I know is this. On that particular ball club, I was the only one without a guaranteed contract. Everybody else had a guaranteed contract with me.
Well, in that 1978 season, you defeated Cleveland before you met Philadelphia. What was it like to go up against Cleveland, given the way that you left before heading to the Knicks?
That didn't bother me that much because, let's see, Stepien was the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers at that time. He was having issues about playing black players and everything else. That didn't bother me. Actually, they thought they were going to beat us, but they had, you know how you have a big pregame show and the introductions, and it lasted forever. I'll never forget. We were getting ready to go out on the floor for the first time. I said to Bob McAdoo, I said, you know what? Their butts are kind of tight. I said, that introduction took too long. And that was the reason why we beat them. We were pretty good. I truly believe the NBA, again, did not do the New York Knicks a favor. After we beat Cleveland, we had to play the 76ers in less than 24 hours. We never practiced, and it was an afternoon game on top of that. So we didn't even have time enough to enjoy the win. Here we go. We're now getting ready to play the 76ers with Doc and McGinnis and that group. We didn't stand a chance. We really didn't. NBA did that to us. NBA did that because we were a scary team with Bob McAdoo and Spencer Haywood. I'm just telling you, we were a scary team. Earl Monroe, we were scary. When we were on, we were damn good. When we weren't on, anything could happen.
Well, that season is 1978 you're referring to. You were 43 and 39. Willis Reed was replaced by Red as head coach. 1979 was your final season, and then after you finished playing for the Knicks in 79, you remained as an assistant coach to Red Holzman through the 1982 season. So what was it like to have Red as your coach when you were playing versus joining him as an assistant on the sidelines?
Like I said, I didn't know what I had done to impress him enough to want to be a coach. So when I got the call in Kentucky about coming back, I thought he wanted me to come back as a player. You understand, still, I'm only 31. Will soon be 32. They had just brought Earl back, who was 2 years older than me. He says, I want you as a coach. They brought Earl back that day that I got the call. Then they were going to play the Cleveland Cavaliers in Cleveland. And he says, I want you here. I said, Red, no. You and Earl go ahead and do your thing. I'll meet you in Cleveland. And that's how my coaching career got started. Look, I learned from the best, okay? He was the best. He really was the best.
What do you think made him so good?
I thought he had good people skills. I really did. He was a great tactician. For him to have won 2 championships with the ball club, the only thing that was going against him was the fact that the different type of player that was coming into the league, the young kids that were coming in. Red believed that you should be motivated, self-motivated to play. Sharman had started the shoot-arounds with the L.A. Lakers. Red hated shoot-arounds, all right? Red believed that you got ready for the game, whatever your routine was, and you come to work. Because I was younger, he made me go out and scout teams, give them the scouting reports, then walk through with the teams at a very early age. He trusted me doing that. I used to set up and get inside his head, especially when we had back-to-back games. If we played at home and went on the road, and wherever we went on the road to, I was normally up in Red's suite. He's drinking his duels and water, and I'm trying to get inside of his head about, why did you call a timeout in the third quarter? We were up. I'm trying to get all of this information. I'm trying to soak it all in. And Red always told me, he says, as you're sitting here watching the game, you got to think 2 minutes ahead, okay? As you're watching the game, you watch the score, you watch the time, but you got to think 2 minutes ahead. That's how you have to be ahead of it. Look, you won't even believe the number of nights I'd set up till 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, let him sleep all day while I had to get up and go to shoot around on the road.
Did you draw the most from Red Holzman over the years when it came to your coaching, which we'll get to shortly?
At the professional level and even at college, it's just how you want to try to treat players. When I became an assistant coach, Red used to bring in guys to work to get Clyde in shape, to get Earl in shape, which I never knew about. They weren't going to make the team, and he knew it. He just made sure he worked a deal out with the organization to give these guys a little more money than what they were going to make anyway, okay? And they would be the last to be cut. Pete and them, they write one of those articles, this is their time, they're going to break in, blah. They weren't going to make it. But, but Red made sure that they were compensated for what they did to get his ball club ready. And he was truthful with that. I had coaches who weren't truthful, and that hurts. It's like the coach I had in Seattle when I was up there for 1 year, Tom Masoki. He didn't have a clue. He lied to me more than anybody I've ever seen in my life. And as a young player, you don't want somebody to lie to you. Just tell me the truth and let me deal with it.
Thanks for elaborating there. You ventured into broadcasting in the mid-1980s. How did that opportunity present itself, and how did you find the transition to calling games rather than actually coaching?
Well, when I was the assistant coach with the New York Knicks, Red never said anything to the press that made any sense. As he used to tell me, you talk too much. You tell them too much, which I do, okay? Madison Square Garden, MSG, was just getting started. They wanted Red pregame, halftime, postgame. Now, Red's not going to tell them anything. All right? Nothing. Nothing at all. Okay? So they stuck me on. And when they fired Red, I had some time left on my contract. I thought I was going to go back to Kentucky and pick up that money. It was easy money. Red had done a great job of compensating me as an assistant coach. I was one of the highest paid assistants at that time in the NBA. That's when the Coaches Association got started. Some of the older guys were a little upset that I was making as much money as I was making. But Red said, we don't care, okay? When they fired Red, Madison Square Garden decided that I could do the job TV-wise. I had never done TV other than the interviews at halftime and pregame and postgame. I asked them to send me someplace to help me to have a presence in front of the camera, which they did. Really, I enjoyed it. I don't know if people enjoyed my little comments, but I did enjoy working. I worked with two of the greatest in the world, Marv Albert, who everybody knows, and Jim Carvallis, who is an old-timer. He's passed. But, boy, they made it easy for me. You know, Adam, they made it real easy for me. It was just like you and I, talking basketball, made it easy.
That's great to hear. Speaking of Marv, there's one particular game that stands out that you and Marv call, and that's the 1984 playoff series, the Knicks and Pistons at Joe Louis Arena. Game 5, that classic matchup. What stands out most about that iconic game? That's the game where Bernard King went for 44 points, Isaiah Thomas 35.
Oh, Lord. Other than the fact that Isaiah got hot to make that game what it was, I felt so sorry for Kelly Tripucka. Bernard just wore him out. It was almost like a murder. Bernard at that particular time was just beginning to come into his own about who we knew he was. Man, he wore Kelly out. They had no answers. I could see Chuck Daly to this day trying to figure out, how do we guard this guy?
In that game, Kent Benson, I think, was running towards the bench at one stage. He crashed over the bench into Marv Albert and yourself. I don't know if you actually remember that or not.
Did Marv get upset? Did he lose his cool?
No, Marv jumped out of the road. Kent landed almost on you.
Typical Marv, okay? All right. Oh, you want to hear a good Marv Albert story?
Oh, please.
Oh, great Marv Albert story. Live TV is wonderful. Pre-game show, you do a run-through early. So we're in Milwaukee, and we go back to use the dressing room for the last time, and Marv putting his makeup on and blah, blah, blah. So I still think to this day that Hubie Brown had something to do with this, okay? They were in the locker room when we came in to use the bathroom. And as we were getting ready to leave, the damn door is locked. We had about 5 minutes before we were going on the air live. Marv is banging on the door like crazy. Bradley Arena is in the back. He's going nuts. Bam, bam, bam on the door. And I'm looking at him. And hey, you know. I said to Marv, Marv, it's kind of tight on us, isn't it, dude? I said, man, they might find a play-by-play guy, but a color commentator is going to be hard to find. So a guard came back with about a minute and a half to go, and you got to know Marv. We run up and get in front of the camera and everything, and we do our little pregame show, and we have the commercial in between. Marv turns to me, he says, I'll never go to the bathroom with you again, regardless of where it is. I said, Marv, come on, man. You're trying to blame me for all of this. But, boy, you should have seen it. You're talking about panic-stricken? Oh.
Cutting it very fine there, I think.
Oh, it killed him when I said, a play-by-play guy. They could probably find one anywhere. But I said, man, finding a color commentator? Oh, that's going to be hard to find.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that one. You returned to the sidelines as an assistant coach in 1989 with the New Jersey Nets under none other than head coach Willis Reed. So your paths link again.
Yep.
You spent 2 seasons with the Nets. What drew you back into the coaching game?
Will got me back into it as an assistant coach. And Here's what everybody told me, Adam. If I wanted to be a head coach in the NBA, I had to get head coaching experience. Now, how the hell you get head coaching experience unless somebody takes a chance and give you the job? Today, you got guys, they have no experience in coaching whatsoever. They get $5 million 5 years. They're telling me back then, I had to go and get head coaching experience. So Bill Fitch came the following year after Willis he didn't get fired. He just stepped up. And Bill was wearing me out. I was doing everything. I did everything. As a matter of fact, Rick Carlisle should bless me because I taught him everything he knew. He was with the ball club as a player, didn't make the team. Fitch liked him and brought him on as our video coordinator. And then he became an assistant coach. But as far as knowing stuff about coaching and what to do, I took Rick with me on scouting trips to New York, Washington, D.C., showed him how to put things together. You understand? So all those things I helped him to organize. But back then, the NBA was saying that I needed head coaching experience in order for them to even think in terms of me being a head coach in the NBA. Now, is that systemic racism? I don't know. That's the way it was then. I was fortunate enough to go to Howard University and do something with 15 kids that didn't think that they would ever do, and that's go to the NCAA tournament. And then Will gave me a shot again back in the NBA with the New Jersey Nets. But that was my path to being a head coach in the NBA.
I did not know that about Rick Carlisle, so there you go. That's fascinating to hear.
Rick, hey, here's how it happened. Rick was a video coordinator. Bill Fitch, we were playing the Knicks, all right? For whatever reason, Joey Crawford didn't want to hear his voice. Bill Fitch got kicked out of the game within 40 seconds. I couldn't even get up to Fitch, okay, to get in between Joey and Fitch. We were at the old Meadowlands Arena. I tell the ball boy, go back and get Rick. He was putting together some spots for us at halftime. And we ended up beating the Knicks that night, okay? And I'll never forget, Rick called me Cowboy. He says, damn, Cowboy, this is a lot of fun, isn't it? I said, I don't know about you, but I had to work to get this win, Rick. You understand? This wasn't easy at all. So that's how he got into the coaching profession. A hell of a night. The New Jersey owners, all 7 of them, they take me out to get after game meal. It was wild. That was it.
You've shared some terrific stories and memories of your life in basketball. I know that you've talked on previous podcasts at some length about your head coaching days with the New Jersey Nets, and then you went on to do some assistant coaching with the Dallas Mavericks, a season with Washington in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
But just recently, as we record this, you were interviewed for an article with, I think it's Stephen Bondi, is that how you say his name, from the New York Daily News?
Yes.
You lament the lack of black executives in the NBA. That's a really insightful and thoughtful piece. One of your quotes was, Jerry West ain't the only one who knows basketball, which I think is a fair call. How did you find reaction to that article?
Well, Adam, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people didn't like me saying what I said because of the mere fact I'm not a so-called superstar, so I'm not supposed to have an opinion. But I did talk about the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is whether or not a black man can organize, whether or not he's smart enough to organize, okay? And that's the reason why I was trying to tell Stefan that we have to get away from that particular connotation about black males. Most owners don't think that black males can organize. They don't think that we have the brain to lead anybody. They think that I can teach a black man how to play. I can teach him how to play, but I can't teach him to organize and be a leader of other men. And that's the reason why it upsets me. By saying that Jerry West is not the only one, that ended up being the quote. But as you know, when you do articles in the newspaper, you have just so much space, okay? It came down to when I was talking about Jerry West, and he's probably pissed, and I really don't give a crap, all right? I said, Jerry West is not the only one who knows basketball. He's made a living in helping organizations, and he's good at what he does. But I said, how come Oscar Robertson How come the greatest scorer of all time, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, can't do anything to help the NBA? Okay. So he only got what he wanted to get, which I understand. And the reason why I talked to Stefan is because he had done some articles, coaches on coaching nominees for the New York Knicks. And the black coaches, he didn't specialize them. Tom Thibodeau is a defensive specialist. Kenny Atkinson, he's a developer of guards. And his offense, the spacing and all this. And I'm telling him, I said, you know what the NBA is? The NBA is the biggest copycat league in the world. And they are. Nobody does anything different. He talked about Tom being a lifer. I said, you know what a lifer is? A lifer is Butch Beard. Now, the last 4 years up until this year, I was in Louisville, Kentucky, all right, working at a historical black school, working with underprivileged kids, trying to help them through basketball to see if they can get an education so they can survive, all right? I got a stipend. I lost money every day I was there. That's a lifer. But nobody talks about Butch Beard. So that's the reason why that article popped up. A lot of it didn't get in, but that's okay. I think that LeBron, I think that Chris Paul, I think those guys will force the NBA to at least look at their problem when it comes to having African-American males in the front office or being leaders of teams. I can't say that about the colleges. The colleges is the greatest slave mentality going, because the players today should be paid. The colleges make too much money.
They're earning lots of money off the players, and yet the players don't earn a single cent throughout their tenure.
Players don't earn a dime. You got to understand this, Adam. You're a pretty smart guy. I kind of like you more than you even know. You okay? Not because you're talking to me. You do your homework. When I saw the article about the Power 5 conferences in football, they were trying to get football started again in college, or else they would lose $4 billion. Pardon my friends. They didn't give a shit if those kids ended up with COVID. They wanted to play so they could get that money. If you really want that money, why don't you share some of that money with those players? Don't give it all to the coaches. Do you know of any coach in America or in the world, for an example, this is just an example in football, is Saban, all right? Makes $10 million a year at Alabama. Great coach. Don't get me wrong, great coach. I ain't seen him catch a pass, make a tackle yet. $10 million. Players make nothing. When I came along, I might have had a different idea in the 60s because the money wasn't as great as it is now. It's stupid now. The money's stupid now, okay? They need to share that money.
It is outrageous.
Adam, look, I intimidate a lot of guys. The reason why? I have an opinion, and it scares the hell out of them. And to be honest with you, the people who are scared of me, they don't even know me. They don't have a clue who I am, okay? They really don't. When you see what you saw in the article, you'd say, oh, he's an angry black guy. No, I'm not an angry black guy, but I want to bring some things to your attention.
It's definitely a good article to read. For what it's worth, I'll include a link to that in the show notes. Basketball Digest had a regular feature which was called The Game I'll Never Forget. We may have already touched on it, but is there a game from your career, either as a player or a coach, that stands out above all others?
Well, there's two games.
Okay.
In college, my sophomore year, I had a triple-double against LaSalle at Louisville. I think it was 34, 12 rebounds, 10 assists. That's pretty good back in the day, okay? All right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The other one was when I was at Howard University, and it's my second year there. And the minute I got the job, I kept telling the kids, we're going to go to the NCAA tournament. They looked at me like I was the Twilight Zone, all right? So I got blood out of that tournament. But in order to win our championship tournament game, we were 18 down. And I remember calling a timeout, and I told them, I said, listen, do me a favor. You guys bust your butt. Get us within 6 points with 2 minutes to go, and I'll out-coach the guy down there. So with 2 minutes to go, there was a timeout, TV timeout, 6 points down. They all came to the bench, and they said, it's on you now, coach. And we pulled it out and made it. We were in it together. Those 15 kids are now grown men. I'm the happiest man in the world because we stay in contact. They call me Father's Day. You can't ask for anything else, okay? You can't ask for anything else.
That's fantastic to hear. Heartwarming story too. The last question I had for you, do you have any particular significance to the jersey numbers that you wore during your career? You had number 14 at Louisville, 14 with Atlanta, with Cleveland, Seattle, and Golden State. I believe you had number 21, and then you wore number 9 with the New York Knicks. Is there any significance to any of those jersey numbers?
The only one that has some significance is number 14, and that's because the other guy that I idolized was the Big O, Oscar Robertson.
Ah, okay.
If I could play basketball, I'd like to play basketball like Oscar Robertson, okay? He wore number 14, all right? And I wished I was as good as he was. Then I could walk around and really be proud, all right? So that's the reason why. 21 I got when I got to, Seattle. They gave it to me, and at Golden State. Number 9, they just gave it to me. Dave Stallworth wore that number. That's a Nick passed me down, all right? Those two numbers don't mean anything, but I tell people number 21 and number 14 means a lot because 14 I won a championship in high school, and number 21 won a championship in the pros. So those are two big numbers for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been just tremendous to have this period of time to chat with you. Thank you so much for talking to some guy in Australia. I hope you enjoyed reminiscing about your career and life in hoops, and I hope one day we have a chance to maybe do it again. Yes,
I would love to do it again, and you have my contact. I'm here in New York. I'm in Harlem. So if you get back to the big city, if they let you in or if they let us out, I don't. Just get in touch, and we can continue this without everybody else listening, okay?
Sounds like a plan. Thanks so much, and stay safe for what it's worth in the months ahead as well, Butch.
Same to you, Adam. Thank you. And, hey, continued success, okay?
All right. Thanks very much, Butch.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. I welcome your interaction with the show. You can suggest topics or guests you want to hear conversations with. Send me an email. Audio clips are welcome. inallairness@gmail.com. Worldwide, the show has 171 ratings on Apple Podcasts with an average of 4.5 stars, with 90 reviews across all providers. Thanks, as always, for your continued support. If you add a review, I'd love to read it out on a future episode. Your ratings and reviews are one of the best ways to support the podcast. If you enjoy the show, please do tell your basketball-loving friends about it. Your word-of-mouth recommendations are truly worth their weight in gold. Stay up to date with my podcast and subscribe to my monthly email newsletter. You'll receive exclusive details on upcoming podcast episodes, future high-profile guests to appear on the show, and much more. Simply email me inallairness@gmail.com. You can subscribe to my show in various ways. Search for In All Airness, 3 words, on your podcast app of choice. The show is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Overcast, Android, and more. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show and share my web address with your friends and colleagues, inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter @inallairness. Please add your like to the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show.